always be growing. Some people will say, yeah, I know, man, but it's hard. It's just so tough. The struggle, does it ever stop? This is why they call it growing pains. It's not called growing pleasure, or the grass is growing, or that tree is growing, and it's got to break through the soil. You think it's easy? It struggles, man. It pushes for a while, and then it just breaks free. And that's the same thing that you got to do. Is the struggle is real. It's going to happen, but you got to keep pushing forward no matter how tough it feels.
Okay, so hey, what's going on, fellow Rockstar entrepreneurs? Tony here, and with me today, as always, is my partner in crime for this here TV show. We got Dan in the house. Say hey, Dan.
What's up, Dan?
I knew.
What's up, Tony? What's up, fellow rock stars?
I just knew you were going to do that. So, hey, Dan, what's the topic for today?
Today is what? ABL and ABG, which stands for, I'll let you do the honors.
Always be growing, always be learning. I was trying to think of something funny for those letters, but couldn't think of a single thing.
Yeah, what would be that? Like always be licking?
Okay. Always.
Talk about lollipops. Come on, man. Who doesn't like lollipops? Get your head out of the gutter.
I love me a lollipop. Always brown lemons. And I don't know.
Nice. Nice.
I didn't know this would be included, and I did not know this was going to be part of it. So I plead the fifth on this one. Let's hit the ground running.
Yeah, I was trying to move my notes around here, but something happened to them. So hopefully I'll be able to stay on topic here this time. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, we talked about like, what could we talk about on this session? And I think the always be growing and always be learning is something that, everybody should definitely be listening to right now, especially with the holidays coming up here in the US. We have Thanksgiving coming up, and yeah, with the Thanksgiving, what comes along with Thanksgiving? Do you guys, you guys don't do Thanksgiving, do you? What do you guys do?
We just have Black Friday sales, which we've inherited from you guys.
There you go. That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, we get the Black Friday sales. That's literally the last 3-4 years. That's been a big thing here. And interesting statistics, something like 60+% of purchases in Black Friday sales, at least here, have not cost more 6 months before or 6 months after. So what they're saying is 60+% of the things that are purchased in Black Friday sales, there's no savings to be made, but people just get crazy. They get giddy crazy.
Yeah. Well, well, the first thing I wanted to mention was, if you're not growing, what happens?
Oh, well, if you're not growing, you're dying. I think there's no such thing as maintaining. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. Yeah. You grab a plant, right?
Yeah. Well, this plant's dead because it's not alive anyway, so it doesn't matter. I got some live plants over here, but I don't feel like pulling up a big tree or anything like that. But, if a tree is not growing, then it's dying. It doesn't just like take a break and just pause, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So same thing goes for us. If you're not constantly growing and learning and bringing in new information and learning new skills and doing things like that and bettering yourself, then you're dying. You're not getting the nutrients that you need, that your brain needs. And that's where I was kind of tying it back into the Black Friday, for us, Thanksgiving, then Black Friday, where everybody goes out and tries to get all these crazy deals and spending all this money and fighting over all these deals. But I want to, kind of like for myself, and I don't know about for you, Tony, because we never really ever talked about this together, but for myself, for years, I actually didn't go out to Black Friday or anything like that. Instead, especially when I, had all these aspirations and all these things that I wanted to do in my life, I saved that money. And instead of going out there and fighting for all these sales and these deals, I would actually reinvest that into myself, into my betterment of myself for me to learn more, for me to learn business tactics, self-development tactics, hiring coaches, and doing that stuff. I mean, heck, for Christmas, my parents looked at me like I was crazy because we were having Christmas in my parents' house. My kids were young, at the time. I think I only had one child at the time, Kayleen, and she was little. And of course, she got toys and stuff like that. But for my wife, I gave her a big box. So she had all these different boxes to open up, and they were actually tapes and CDs, on self-development and sales and all these different strategies. And my parents were like looking at me like I'm crazy, and looking at us like I was crazy. Because my wife was like, oh, I wanted this one. Yeah, this is awesome. I can't wait to listen to it. My parents were like, what the heck? What's going on? What's wrong with you guys? While everybody else is giving like jewelry and all these other little this stuff, right? This stuff that is going to be used possibly, or it's just going to be shoved in the back of the closet or at the next garage sale, or, a hand-me-down or a re-gift, right? Mm-hmm. People love doing that as well. And we weren't doing that. So I want to tell you guys out there, hey, think about, do I really need this stuff that I'm going out there to fight over for a flat screen TV that this company discounted for a specific reason just to get rid of it? Because they had overstock, or they just wanted to get you into the store so you'll buy other stuff that aren't really a great deal. And, so what? You save $200, $500 on a TV. Well, if you reinvest that money, because this is how I saw it. If I reinvested that money back into myself and into, my wife, and for us to learn and grow more, and also into my business today, if I reinvest that into my business, people ask me like, are you going to go to, holiday shopping, Black Friday? And I'm like, no, I don't need to, it's great to save a little bit of money, but I don't need to. I'd rather be working on myself and investing in myself. And then I can buy all the stuff I want. And it's not, oh, I'm going to get this because it's on discount, right? Instead, I can just buy the one that I want, or I can buy it from wherever I want. I can buy it on Amazon. I can buy it off of another website. I don't have to buy the one just because they're saying, hey, you can come buy it at this time.
I was just looking, as you were saying that, I was looking over there at my bookshelf, looking if I could see Robert Cialdini's Influence, where he talks about scarcity. And I think that's a huge driving factor about these Black Friday sales. And if you just take a step back and think, like you said, they're discounting them for a reason, whether that's just to get you in the store or because there's a newer version coming out or something like that. I think the discounts, they tend to stay, don't they? Apart from the really, really crazy ones. Yeah. So if you just disconnect yourself from that whole Black Friday scarcity and then just come back to what you're saying, like, do I really even need this thing? I think that's a lot of it, isn't it? We get wrapped up in the hype of it all, when in reality, do you really need it? And what could you be doing better with that money, like you said?
Exactly. Yeah. I'll give you another example. I remember, and this is when I made this shift in myself because I wanted to be successful. I remember there was this mastermind, this event, this workshop mastermind coming up, and it was like, I think it was like $2,000. It was either $1,500 or $2,000 or something like that. And that number, and for some of you, that number is astronomical. You're like, whoa, I can't afford that. And some of you are like, oh, I've heard of more expensive ones. And yeah, I've actually joined more expensive ones. But at that time, that $1,000 or $2,000 workshop mastermind might as well have been $50,000 to me because I didn't have that cash. Yeah. And I remember what I ended up doing was I'm like, okay, first off, I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to do this. I want to attend this. It was actually, full disclosure, it was my wife that I wanted to, because she was my partner in the business and I knew only one of us could go. And I was like, okay, I want her to go so she can learn, and then she'll come back and tell me what she learned, and it'll help our business. And what I ended up doing is I looked around the house and I'm like, what could I sell? Well, I couldn't sell my car because I needed that, right? I needed that to go do my appointments in my business that I was doing at the time. So I was like, okay, I can't really sell my car because that wouldn't make much sense. But instead, what else could I sell? So I started looking around. I'm like, okay, well, I've got this big screen TV. And back in those days, that big screen TV wasn't a flat screen because we didn't have those, right? Mm-hmm. It was this, I don't remember what they called them. It was like projection or something like that. It probably was, but it was a 37-inch or 42-inch, which was like humongous and heavy. It was probably 500 pounds. Mm-hmm. It was a Sony. I think I paid like $2,000 or $3,000 for that TV at one point. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sell this. So I put it on Craigslist, sold it for like, I don't know, $900 or something like that. So I needed a little bit more money. And then I ended up selling some old stereo equipment, car stereo equipment that I had, because I used to like soup up my rides. I had like, lowered cars, sport cars, 5-star rims, Viper rims, that kind of stuff. I had a big 18-inch subwoofer in the back. I had, all the amps and earthquake amps and all the stuff, and kicker speakers, or I think was it earthquake? I think it was earthquake speakers and amps I had back then. And so I put those for sale as well. And my like touch screen, which was like, the shit back then, my touch screen, like a receiver, DVD or not DVD, CD player as well, receiver for the car. And I sold all that stuff for, I don't know, maybe 500, 800 or something like that. So right there was the money. And I did that within a couple days. And got my wife to go to that mastermind and had a breakthrough. And even though it wasn't like that was like the tipping point of everything happening, all those little things that we did, listening to the CDs, to the tape series, which now would be like Audible or podcasts, because we didn't have podcasts back then. Mm-hmm. So we had to go to events. We had to buy CDs. We had to buy audiobooks, tapes, right? We had to get tapes. We couldn't do it on Audible or something like that. And we would just listen to those every single day, all day long. So instead of listening to music, or instead of watching TV, or instead of going to the movies or watching movies on TV and spending an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours a day doing that, when we're in the car driving, instead of listening to music, we would listen to those tapes and those CDs. And today, instead of that stuff, I actually, and read books, read books at home. So instead today, I actually listen to podcasts. I watch YouTube videos, or I listen to YouTube videos that are like video podcasts like we're doing right now. Yep. And that's why we're doing this. I'd rather not do video, but I'm going to do it because that's how I choose to learn my content when I'm working out. Yeah. Instead of listening to music, I'll put music in our Sonos speaker where it's like in my workout room in my house, and I'll play music really low, but then I'll put in my earbuds, my Apple EarPods, I'll put those in and I'll listen to either a podcast on Spotify, or I used to use iTunes, but now I use Spotify, or I'll listen to an audiobook, or I'll listen, to something on YouTube and learn. And I'm doing that. And that's what I did every single day. I would spend hours either reading books, listening to audiobooks. Today I do Audible as well. But yeah, I would just spend hours and hours consuming all that stuff because I knew whatever I put in, enough of that would stick, that it would plant those seeds for me to make those shifts in my own business and my own life. And then it became part of my DNA. And today, people will ask me like, what books are you reading? And I'm like, I'm not really reading any books anymore. I consume content on podcasts, like I said, or on YouTube, listening to stuff like that. But a lot of the stuff, is things that I've accomplished in my own life today that nobody else is talking about, right? Yeah. Like we're doing right now.
I think books always get given this kind of they get put a little bit higher on a bit of a pedestal, books. But if you think about it, like this conversation we're having right now, this is live, this is fresh, and within, it's either going out live to people watching it or soon after. Whereas a book, if you think about somebody sits down to write it, and then it gets edited and it goes through drafts and revisions and then gets published and printed and all of that jazz. So stuff can go, especially in this world that we're living in now, and especially in the circles that we're kind of, or the ponds that we're swimming in, the things advance so quickly. I mean, like, look at Gary V's Crushing It. You know, he doesn't mention LinkedIn once, and now on all his podcasts he's going,
or TikTok.
I should have mentioned that. And in that he talks about Musical.ly, which is now TikTok. It's all out of date so quick, so fast. I think that audio is great for keeping up, but also, I got to say, I have the best of intentions, and you know, I said I was looking over there at all of the books and whatnot that I've got, and I've read maybe 10% of them, and do you know what? It's probably maybe more than that, but it's always the same ones that I reread as well. I don't know if you have that, where, you know, like
I did.
Yeah.
I used to. Let me remind me. I want to bring something up about the book format, but I want to also mention, like yourself. I mean, fun fact: I'd never actually read a book when I was in high school, or you know, maybe I read little children books when I was a little kid, but you know, like the Cow Jumped Over the Moon or my ABC books. But you know, as a junior high or high school or anything like that, I never read an entire book. When I would look at a book, when I was told I had to read a book for school or something, I would look at the pages, and as I was reading, I would forget every single thing I'm reading as I was reading it. Yeah. I would have to mentally slap myself and focus in order to retain any words I was reading, and still I would forget. So I just thought that I wasn't good at reading. So when I met my wife, she loved to read, and she said, let's go to the bookstore and let's get some books. And I'm like, no way, books suck, you know? But I wanted to grow, and I was starting at that time. It was my personal training business that I was running. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'll try this. She's like, just go look around and see what books you like. So I started walking around. I went to the business sales side because I had to sell in my business, and I hated sales. And I found a leadership book, and it was this Malcolm Maxwell. Or is that no? I don't think it was Malcolm Maxwell. It was one of those books. Was one of his books. I forgot which one it was, but there was another book, the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff.
Yeah.
And that book was small, short little stories and inspirational stories. And I started reading it while I was there, and I got captivated. I'm like, holy crap, this is awesome. And I was in my early 20s or mid-20s, and I was just like, actually, I like reading now. And I must have read over 100 books in the first year. I went freaking nuts. I was a sponge. I was listening to audiobooks as well, but I was just going through books like crazy because there wasn't a lot of audiobooks at that time anyways, and they were more expensive. They were like $50 to $100 for an audiobook, and it was $10, 12, 15, 20, whatever for a regular book. And I was just reading them like crazy, and I was reading them in the shop. Some of them I would buy, and I would buy them later because I didn't have a lot of money at that time. But I've read at least 85% of my books. And the only reason I say 85 is because later, a couple of years ago, I had bought more books that people recommended. I just never read them because get to this point, two things. One, I kind of learned that books are not my primary way for me to learn, and it never was. I just forced myself to do it because there wasn't any other options. But today, you know, again, like I said, we have podcasts, we have YouTube, we have all these other ways that we can learn and get free and paid content. I belong to memberships. I spend hundreds of dollars a month on different kinds of memberships that I don't even always consume every month, but it's there for when I want to learn something. Learn free things on YouTube. And I love doing it that way. But what I was going to bring up, that point about the books, is exactly what you said, is that two things. One, when you grab a book, you know, it took at least 6 months to a year, sometimes even longer, for that book to actually come out. So things have changed, but also how many other people have stepped on it. You know, what about that publisher? If it wasn't self-published, that publisher could have said, we don't want you putting this in there. And because they're paying the bills, you know, the author's like, okay, fine. And then another point I was going to bring up that I heard not that long ago, pretty recently, was that when you're an author, and I guess when you're writing your first book, there's not as much pressure because they don't know if it's going to take off anyways, as far as from the publisher. But after you have a successful book, the first book, then they're like, okay, this dude sold millions of books, or this, person sold 1 million books. We need your next book to be in 3 months. Bless you.
Thank you.
We need your book to be in the next 3 months, right?
Yeah.
And then the pressure comes on, and then it's no longer okay, am I creating a book that people need, or am I creating a book because now my publishers forced me to create this content and that's why I hear all the time, I look at certain, some big authors out there that have had some great books in the past, that I go and I look at their most recent book, and people are like, it's more of the same, nothing really new, kind of boring. And, and that's probably the reason why, is because they were forced to release another book because their publisher didn't want them to not become relevant, or they gave them an advance and they had to put out 3 books or something like that within a certain amount of time. So that's what I love about podcasts. That's what I love about, YouTube videos, is that, like we're doing right now, I have some notes in front of me, and you'll see me look kind of up at the screen every now and then so I can try and stay on topic, because my ADD will kick in and I'll see a squirrel, right? I'll look at a squirrel. But, we can be real with this. We can, whatever comes to us in the moment, from the ether, from the cosmos, from the multiverse that says, hey, you need to hear this, or I need to remember this. Because a lot of the times the stuff me and you, Tony, talk about, with an audience or without an audience, reminds us of things that we should be doing, or that we've done in the past that worked, or maybe we wanted to try that we learned from somebody else. And that's what I love about this, is so much can come out of it organically, and we're not waiting 6 months or a year for something to be released and then it get watered down, right? Because for myself, I'll bring up a last point. For myself, when I wrote my books, I'd actually hired I had self-published both my books, and my wife has self-published her books as well. But I hired editors. And just so you know, I'm a D- student. I should have been an F student in everything, but I guess because they needed to hit their quota of graduated students. And side story here, I know I should have been an F student, and I was like kind of testing the system as a student, that I would not turn anything in, and I would just do A, B, C, D, A, B, B, C, D, and I would do all my tests like that, and just to see what would happen. And I still got a D or a D-, and I passed all my grades. And I'm like, what is this? How can this be? And I'm doing all this crap, right? And they're letting me get through it. But the point I was getting to from that little story right there was that I got a D-, or I should have got an F in English. I was not good at spelling. I knew the basics, and we didn't have spell checkers like we do today, right?
Yeah.
We had to actually get a book to look in that book. Did I, A, B, C, and look through there to find it and see if we spelled it right. So it wasn't as convenient. And I definitely didn't do good in English, but I wrote 2 Amazon best-selling books. How did I do that? Well, because this D- F student hired an A+ master's in English person, a few $100, and they edited the entire thing for me. And what's funny is it came back with all these red lines of like, this isn't natural to say it this way. You shouldn't say this in a book. This is like only for talking out loud. You put this word in here, all these other things, and all this different punctuation. And it was funny because I had actually hired 2 editors, and both of them had like masters and these ultimate, certifications and all that. And that was when I first realized that proper grammar and English and punctuation is more of a guideline than a hard, fast rule, because they were actually arguing without them even knowing each other.
Yeah.
They were arguing different points, like use this, don't use this. And I'm like, how could this be? And I asked one of them, I was like, I had somebody else also look at it, and they said the opposite. And they're like, well, it can go either way. Some people believe this. And I'm like, what? This is like the weirdest thing, but that's my point, I
think that going back to something you said earlier about reading and it not going in. So I just thought I'd mention this before I forget. I found that when I read stuff, the same happens with me. And I find that I learn much, much better if I read out loud the words that I'm reading. And I just find that it goes in a lot better. Now, that's usually something like small children would do. They would like read and go, what could be better than driving a supercar of your choice? They'd read out like that. But for me, if I'm taking in information, I find that it just fires more of my kind of modalities, my learning modes or whatever, by reading it and hearing it and actually saying it as well at the same time. So that kind of touches on why I think I prefer audiobooks and stuff. But I do find that my mind starts to wander. So by kind of making my own audiobook, I prefer audiobooks over sitting and reading because I do a lot of driving. So I find the time, whereas making the time to sit and read just seems, when you've got a small child and you've got a household and you've got whatever you need to do. I think when you're driving, you've no excuse not to. But I do think that reading aloud helps me retain the information better. But I prefer to just listen anyway because that's kind of my mode or my learning modality. What say you on the topic of different learning modalities, Dan?
Yeah. It's all on the person. So if you retain more and love reading, then yes, do more of that. But you should definitely still be listening to either podcasts or whatever it is in that field that you're trying to learn. Mm-hmm. I would process that, because if you're, trying to become a better video editor, or you're trying to, learn how to do sales better, or there's going to be different platforms that content is going to be best consumed for. So it's kind of a balance of what works best for you, but also depending on what that is that you're trying to learn and where that is being processed. Now, for me, again, like I said, I don't really do a lot of reading, but that doesn't mean that I won't grab a book, but I will Google stuff and I will look up stuff online and read things. Heck, even before we were doing this, we were testing out some software, right? Unsuccessfully.
Yes, we were.
And I had to Google stuff and learn that way. And I watched a video and I read text and I did all these other things.
Yep.
But for myself, like I said, I do podcasts. I belong to a mastermind. In the past, I belonged to other masterminds. I invest in myself. I do networking with others, like-minded people. I make friends with people that are actually operating at a higher level than me, because in order for you to grow, you need to be able to have people that are at a higher level than you as well, not just at your level or below yourself, because that's how you force yourself to grow and to stretch. I also have, a mentor and a coach that I actually pay money to. And I've done that for many, many years. Where, I would do it weekly. Sometimes I do it every other week. I'm back to weekly again. And, I've spent a lot of money on coaches. Heck, in 1 year, I'd spent over $100,000, like no joke. I can show you the wire transfer for $100,000, not including trip costs and events and stuff that I did. I probably spent over $150,000 in real cash just doing those. But I got so much from it, and I made so many new friends. And
so it was an investment.
It's an investment in yourself. Yeah, and not everything is going to be, a a return on investment instantly. Some things that I've done that I've spent money on didn't pan out, and I can go back and complain about them and say, oh, I wouldn't go as far as saying it was a scam, just saying it was hyped up way more than what it was worth, and I didn't really make any money off of it. But, I got one thing from it, and that, sometimes that one thing might have been a compliment, or they might have turned me on to a specific piece of software or tool or a way of doing something that I've continued to use today that have helped me either save time, make money, save money, or something like that. Then it's a win, because I'm not going to sit there and do checks and balances and like, okay, well, this worked and this didn't work or anything like that, because, you never know when you're going to need something. So I'm just going to keep consuming and adding things to my arsenal. And when I need it, I'm going to go get it. And this is exactly what like lawyers and doctors will do. Doctors and lawyers don't memorize every ailment and everything there is. Right? If you're a doctor and you have a rare case from or a case that you're not that familiar with, you're gonna either go to your books or you're gonna go to your colleagues, right?
Yeah. And well, they also have their own kind of medical version of Google. At least at my local doctors, they do. They have a computer like database that's basically a search engine for ailments.
Yeah, I got to stop saying books because that's old, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's the same point is they've got something they go back to, a database, because, you're not going to be able to maintain every single thing in the entire world of what ifs this and what ifs that. Yeah. It's only what you need at that particular moment. And that's why it's good to continue learning, because you never know when you're going to need it. And be reminded of something that maybe you'd forgotten about because you didn't need to use it at that time.
Yeah, I think one thing that you touched on there with doctors and lawyers, where I thought you were going with that, is that in those fields, not just doctors and lawyers, other fields too, there's a requirement for them to keep their license. They have to do CPD, continued professional development. So that's something that's obviously, particularly with entrepreneurs, that's something that folks neglect without a doubt because there's no consequence. And I wonder if, I wonder if the doctors and the lawyers and those people, I wonder if they see that as an expense or an investment, which is what we're talking about, is continually investing in yourself. And that's a subtle shift, isn't it, from thinking, oh, I've got to spend this money, like, it's a monthly outgoing or whatever, to thinking, oh, it's an investment. Because what you said about going somewhere or doing something or investing in something and not getting an immediate return from it, well, that's looking at it as an expense, isn't it? Whereas you're saying, well, no, I'm sure in the long run it'll all be fine, because you're coming out with an attitude of investment, and also this short-term view is also a mindset of scarcity, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's like watching a plant or a tree grow. You put a little bit of water on it, you give it some fertilizer or whatever you need to put in there. You don't see it grow instantly, do you? Do you see it like pop up, boom, it's a tree, or boom, it's a plant? No, it takes so long that if you were to stare at it every single day, you would not really see it happening. You would have to film it and speed it up in a time lapse in order to see anything really happening. Yeah. Right. It's so small. And that's the same thing that's going on with us, is it's so small that you typically don't see it. And then eventually you become what people call an overnight success. Right. Yeah. They're like, oh, look at them. They're an overnight success. And you're like, dude, you didn't see all the times that, I was like sitting there going through all these books and listening to these CDs and these audio programs and struggling and digging through my couch cushion for loose change so I'd have gas money to go to a meeting to try and make more money in my business. And, and borrowing money from family to the point to where they said, get your head out of the clouds and why don't you go get a real job? And you're just like, and I'm going to show them, once I'm successful, I'm going to show them. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, another point on that is all these people you wanted to prove wrong, man, once you become successful, it just isn't really as fun. You feel kind of humbled, because until you can feel humbled, you won't be successful to that point to where you'll go, I'm going to go rub people's faces in it, because that's not what it takes to become successful. I'm sure some people out there have done something where, there's probably a few that have gotten like overnight type success on accident or something like that, but they're not long to last if they have that kind of mentality of like, I'm going to go rub everybody's noses in it. But I don't have anybody tell me anymore, like get my head out of the clouds. All they do is say, hey, I'm proud of you. Hey, you're doing great. Wow. Yeah. That's so cool. And then they're talking about you. Nice. And that's great.
I think people who are focused on, I'll show them, I'll rub their noses in it kind of attitude, I wonder if they feel a massive anticlimax when they reach that, where they can, like you said, those few who do get there and they've still got that urge to rub people's noses in it. When they get there, I wonder if they then go like, now what? I wouldn't like that to be me. I guess that's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm wanting to show anyone or prove anything to anyone, but I think that would be a really crappy win. I wouldn't be happy with that win.
Yeah, I can't speak for anybody else. Just for myself, that you get there and it just becomes this awareness of consciously you remember the things that they said, and that this wouldn't work or anything like that. And it did. And you don't go back and say, remember when, or anything like that. You just don't, you feel like, I don't want to say the bigger person, but it's like being an adult and your child, or a child is like, saying some dumb stuff that makes no sense, because children say dumb things like, like when I was a kid, I remember thinking that, cats were female and dogs were males, like okay. I thought one was the masculine, one was the feminine, I mean, it made sense to me. And I probably said that to somebody and they probably looked at me like I was dumb, but I mean, they're not going to sit there and be like, oh, you're so stupid, you little 2-year-old or 3-year-old, you're dumb, like as an adult. Maybe stupid a kid would say that, but an adult, that would just be really harsh. So that's kind of what it kind of feels like, is that, and I was actually thinking about this earlier today and a couple days ago, where you have all these people talking about veganism and saying, you're wrong, veganism is bad for you, and it's not a healthy choice or anything like that, and it's not sustainable, and, and you have to be careful because you're not getting all your nutrients. And it's like, I know it's already getting to that point now, where socially they've accepted, but there's still a couple people holding out that are like on this, no, you still need meat. Yeah. Sure, it's okay for you, but it's still not the best for you.
Yeah, I had one the other day going, what are these for? What are these for?
Yeah.
Shut up.
And it's like, I don't want to argue with them, because it's not where I want to spend my time, and it doesn't bring me happiness to try and prove somebody wrong anymore. So it's just okay, well, I've got people that, yes, had told me that I was wrong, had said, veganism is dumb or whatever, or I can never give up meat or dairy. And now they do. I've seen it happen firsthand, because I've been, vegan now for almost 16 years now, if not 16 years. And my wife as well, and my kids. And I've seen a lot of people change. Some people said, look, something you said stuck with me, and, I started researching it, or I saw this documentary, and this is a couple years ago, and and people change, and I'm not going to sit there and go, yeah, I told you so. It's your life. If you want to be successful, be successful. If you want to, be vegan, be vegan. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to run, how to live your life. You've got to live with the consequences. So, no matter what it is, I'm just going to give you the information. You do with it what you want, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I suppose and that applies to everything, not just veganism, because I know
that was my point. Yeah,
people are going to close their ears. A lot of people, if they're not on that train, they're going to go, "Oh, this doesn't apply to me." But it literally applies to everything, doesn't it? As long as you've put across, what you think will help that person, and assuming that they've kind of requested or hinted at wanting help with that, you've kind of put that across, then you've done your best, I suppose, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's not to say that just because, for instance, somebody might. I've heard this quite recently. Oh, you shouldn't talk about veganism, in these entrepreneurial type, business type stuff because then you're going to turn people off, right? And then they're not going to want to. It's like, no, dude, I'm just being me. I'm being authentic, and I'm putting it out there. And you can choose to listen to it, you want to or not. But what you got to understand is, I listen to people that believe that veganism is wrong, that that they should eat meat and stuff like that. And I learn things from them as well when it comes to business, maybe relationships, maybe things like biohacking, like red light therapy, cold plunges. A lot of those people eat meat, and that's totally fine. I'm not going to go say I'm not going to listen to anything you say because they have their pre-existing beliefs, or for whatever reason they choose to do something else. I choose my mentors according to what I want to learn from them. I might have somebody that is super healthy, but they're not married. So obviously I'm not going to listen to their marital advice or their relationship advice, right? They might not have kids. Well, I'm not going to listen to their advice on children. Okay. That makes that's sense. How it is.
Yeah.
They might be, successful as in the fitness industry or something like that. But I'm not going to listen to them when it comes to marketing if they're not a good marketer themselves, right? They might just be in shape, but they might be lousy at the other stuff.
Yep.
So you got to pick and choose your mentors and kind of look at it as like a menu of, well, I can learn this from this person, but not this from that person, and that's totally fine.
Absolutely. Can't say that I disagree with any of that, which is good. We don't want conflict on here. Now then, on the topic of, so today's subject is always be growing, always be learning. We've talked about taking in information the way that you prefer. And I mentioned that I listen to a lot of audiobooks. That got me wondering, what audiobooks have you listened to recently? I've listened to a couple of good ones I'd like to share, but I'm curious where have you been dedicating your ear rolls recently?
Shoot, why don't you say yours, and I'm going to actually pull up mine just so I can remember, because with Audible, I have a membership and I have all these books I'm adding, and I haven't listened to them because there's so many podcasts that I've been listening to, and sometimes I'll pop open one of the audiobooks and I'm just like, this one's kind of boring the way they're talking. I like this interaction of, versus hi, I'm Dan, and today we're going to be talking about how to get inspiration to get up each day and be your best self. And our first lesson today is to always be growing, right?
Well, there's a lesson in itself. Before you buy the audiobook, before you use that Audible credit, listen to the preview. Because and I tend to read the notes as well, because I never buy fiction on there, but I was going to buy one which was I hadn't read in ages, was a Celestine Prophecy, and I thought, oh, brilliant, it's on Audible. And then I saw in that it's abridged. And somebody reviewed saying that it's missing half of the book, so I didn't get that. But I'll tell you the ones that I got then. So recently, I listened to YouTube Secrets by Sean Cannell and Benji Travis. Okay. And they are brilliant on YouTube. Sean and Benji are brilliant. Sean has, so they have, I think it's called Video Influencers, that channel, and then also on YouTube, Sean Cannell has Think Media, and Benji does cooking stuff. Now, they're both brilliant on camera, very natural and all this, but I gotta say, the audiobook is on the verge of unlistenable. At first, I'll give it that caveat. And the first person that you hear is a guy called Benji, and he says, he talks a bit like you just did then. But the thing that stuck out to me the most was, like, I would say, like pick up a cup of coffee. Like, you know, if I was reading it, I would say pick up a cup of coffee. Right, it's probably a bit of a tongue twister there. But, you know, you'll receive a friendly welcome. Okay, but he says, you'll receive a friendly welcome. And he emphasizes the A. And at first I was like, what the hell am I listening to? And that was, at first, challenging. But it's a great book. I would recommend YouTube Secrets. Maybe get the book, but if not, the audiobook. Sean Cannell and Benji Travis, and that kind of gets you on the road to doing what we're doing right now, actually. And they talk about a little bit about YouTube SEO and stuff. There's nothing groundbreaking, but if you're interested in it, then that's interesting. Yeah. But that's a very nuts and bolts how-to kind of a book. So then to kind of balance that out, I don't tend not to do fiction. But I listened to Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, which I've not read or listened to. But the idea of Big Magic, behind Big Magic, her idea is that ideas are almost like living things, and they come to you and they get your attention, and if you don't do anything with them, they go to someone else. And she gives a few examples of that, and particularly how many times you have an idea and don't do anything with it, and then somebody comes up with that exact same thing, and you're like, that was my idea, what the hell? But you didn't act on it. So that's
I learned that
Big Magic.
I learned that from the yogis. That's the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
Where basically there's all this information, just like right now in our rooms, we have all this information being, you know, transferred all over the place, and without like our computer or our phone to decipher the Wi-Fi signal to attach itself to whatever it is we want to look at, you know, we don't see it. So like looking around up in the room and stuff, I don't see all these little data points and all this stuff going on, these signals all over the place, these radio signals, satellite signals happening all around us. But, you know, the information is all there. And, you know, exactly what you just said, the collective consciousness is not like, you know, these radio waves, but they are similar, but they're the collective consciousness where all around us, you know, all this information is being, you know, passed along. And if you don't take action on it, then somebody else will. Somebody else is also having that thought. And I remember, man, I've written this down before. I don't have the note in front of me, so I'll butcher this story. And let me know if you've heard of this before too. Tony Robbins was the first person I heard talk about it.
All right.
We talked about this this island in Japan where these monkeys were, and I can't remember if the monkeys were starving or whatever, they're hungry or something like that. And they had learned on one of the islands, they had learned to take the potatoes, because they had potatoes, and the potatoes were dirty because they were on the ground, so they didn't eat them. But a monkey, or a few of the monkeys, had learned to wash the potatoes off and then to eat them. So all of a sudden, the neighboring islands that were like, you know, hundreds or whatever miles away from each other, you know, they had no way of communicating. It's not like they grabbed an iPhone and say, hey, bro, here's what I figured out, you know, check this out. Yeah. Hey, monkeys on this other island. No. Yeah. But, you know, all of a sudden, these other monkeys started doing the same thing. And then on the next island, and it spread across. So it was like, it's crazy. And that was the first time that kind of stuck with me. And I thought that was really cool. But that, you know, again, it's the collective energy. And this is one of the reasons why, we'll get into this some other time, but this is why we do Kundalini yoga every single morning, and we'll do a meditation. The yogis will do it like 4 or 5 in the morning as the sun rises, because that's where the information comes. And they say that's also why you'll dream in the early morning as the sun is rising, is when most of your dreams will actually happen. And when you're awake, you're able to take in that information and process it by doing the yoga and doing the, you know, and meditation. And that's why we do that every morning. Now I don't get up. My wife does. She gets up at like 4 or 5 and does it. I used to do it. Now I get up like at 7, and I'll do it about 7:30. Eventually I will start getting up early again. But that's why we do it, is so I can take that in, and then I'm constantly just writing down ideas and
Daily
notes. And
download.
some things I'll never use, but I will tell you, before I started doing Kundalini yoga, and doing meditation with it, this is all part of the Kundalini practice. Before doing that, I was a mess. Like, my head was going, it was like all over the place. Like, basically, if my brain was a computer, it was like spam and overlays and pop-ups popping up all over the place and flashing all over the place.
1,000 browser tabs open.
Yes, that's how my brain worked. I had absolutely no control whatsoever. And today I wouldn't say I have control. I've like tamed the wild horse. But it still does its thing. But I am definitely focused in getting this information downloaded and putting it on paper, putting it in on Evernote, Google Docs, Trello. I'm putting it all over the place. And, that's why we're having this conversation today, is one of the things that came to me. Hey, let's talk about this.
I do wonder how much of that is also to do with having some kind of an end goal in mind. The idea of being more focused and all of that. Do you think you would have done that if you didn't have goals? That's just what popped in my head as you were saying that. So
define goals, though. What do you mean by goals?
Yeah,
though?
Let's say you didn't have plans, goals, ambitions. Say you're a bit just kind of like, let's say you were more reactive. Let's put it that way. So let's say every day you just think, what shall I do today? Instead of being proactive.
I don't know if I could answer it the way you asked, but I think this will answer possibly, is that I didn't want to be on camera. I didn't want to be on stage. I didn't want to write a book. I didn't want to do any of those things. I mean, I'm an introvert, and I would much rather just be hanging out with my kids and having a good time and just kind of giving advice to people here and there. But it's a mission. It's my purpose. It's, it's being called to. And if I don't do it, I'm going to be freaking unhappy. And how do I know that? Because I was unhappy until I started doing it. I wanted to be successful, so I knew I wanted to do that. So the success part, was me overcoming my fears. I had to overcome a lot of fears, which one of them was speaking on stage, which I was definitely afraid of, and but I forced myself to get up there and do it. And still today I am fearful of doing that, but I let that fear drive me to doing it, to leaping first and let the net appear, to trusting in the multiverse and forcing myself to just do it. Just like I do the cold plunge, where doing the cold plunge actually preps me for everything I do in life, because today I stood in front of the cold plunge because my wife couldn't do it, because when you're menstruating, you're not supposed to go into the cold tub or do the cold water therapy. So she wasn't doing it. So I had every excuse to not do it today, where I stood outside of it going, man, I don't want to do this. Man, I don't want to do this. But I said, screw it. I hit the timer and I just got myself in there, dunked my head underwater, laid back in there for 5 minutes. And it just forced me to do it, to take action, to leap first without even thinking. Yeah. And that's how I do things in my life and in my business. I just make the call. Just make the call and deal with it after, Get on stage and deal with it after. I do prep. Yes. I'll write notes, but I won't practice anything because I can't practice. Yeah. It just doesn't work for me. Just give me my notes. I'll get up there and I'll do it.
Fair enough. I'm very, very pleased to hear that, actually, because I'm very fly by the seat of my pants with minimal preparation. But
yeah, and it might suck, but at least we did it.
An end result in mind. So,
exactly. Yeah. And one thing I want to bring up too, and we can circle back on that if you like, is, the whole thing we talked about is, always be growing. And, some people will say, yeah, I know, man, but it's hard. It's just so tough. The struggle, does it ever stop or anything like that? But this is why they call it growing pains. It's not called feeling good right? It's not called,
Yeah.
what's the other thing? I think I took a note here, pleasure, right? So it's not calling growing pleasure, right? It's called growing pains. And when that plant or the grass is growing or that tree is growing and it's got to break through the soil, you think it's easy. It struggles, man. It pushes for a while and then it just breaks free, right? And that's the same thing that you got to do. Is the struggle is real. It's going to happen, but you got to keep pushing forward no matter how tough it feels. You got, no matter like for instance, we were talking about this before the call or before this video, right? And I was actually I had a call with some guys that were at the last mastermind that I went to, and I had to speak in front of, and I was fearful of that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do that. And I was fearful of it, but I did it. I forced myself to do it. And I did my yoga practice while I was there. I had to get up a little earlier to do it. I did a cold shower, which is, especially because it was San Diego, was nothing like my cold plunge. It was like 64 degrees, right? Which is not my normal 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 9 or 10 degrees Celsius. So it was way above that. So it sucked, but I did it. But then I got home and I stopped working out. That was like one thing that suffered. I got out of my routine of working out. And I did that for about 2.5 weeks. And today was the first time that I worked out since that event, which was 2.5 weeks ago. Yeah. And it sucks. But you know what? I got back up on the horse and I'm doing it again. And that's fine. You know, I mean, sometimes you'll take breaks. You'll feel down. You'll struggle. You'll get on yourself and you'll be like, you're a loser. You're not doing this. What's wrong with you? And you might get a little depressed, but you know what? Don't live there. Just get back on there and start doing it again. And then just get yourself out of it. Don't sit there and beat yourself up for something that you can push forward through. Right.
I did hear, and this kind of links up with it. I did hear a good story. And again, it was a video, this old rabbi dude. And he was saying about how is it lobsters? I think maybe it's lobsters. They shed their kind of, not their skin, but their shell or something. They shed their old, I'm sure it's lobsters. They shed their old shell. And then they have to go somewhere safe. Because when they shed it, the new one that's underneath is very soft. So they're very vulnerable for a while, but they know when it's time to shed that old shell because they feel the pressure, they feel the discomfort of that old shell because they've just outgrown it and it's too tight. So they kind of have to wiggle out of it and then let what was underneath kind of harden a little bit before they venture back out. And I think it grows a little bit while they're hiding or something. But yeah, that was probably the worst delivery of a story ever because I've not even got across the point, I think.
I thought it was great. There was a great visual. No, but yeah, you got to trust that taking yourself out of the safe space and the shell that you're going to be okay. And that, that pressure. You have to grow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's another example that actually reminded me of another example. Two examples.
Maybe we can link to that one. Maybe we can link to that one down here or something.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it reminds me of another example of, I always say the caterpillar to the butterfly, even though it's the butterfly lays eggs on a plant. I actually took notes. I remember it's, they have the eggs, the larva, right? And it comes out, the cocoon is the chrysalis, or however you pronounce that, right? Chrysalis. Yes. And it becomes liquid. So the caterpillar wraps itself in this, we'll call it the cocoon, but that's not what it's called, right? Mm-hmm. And it goes in this chrysalis and it liquefies and it feels like it's drowning, right? It's drowning in liquid, and its own liquid that it's making, and it feels like it's dying. I mean, wouldn't you feel like you're dying if this liquid is coming and you're bringing in this liquid, and then all of a sudden, you come out 15 days later, you come out as butterfly, right? Completely. But you have to trust. You have to trust that you're going to come through it with all this pressure and this liquid inside. And the other example I use is a tadpole, right? Mm-hmm. A tadpole is in the water. It's breathes underwater in the water, right? And then what happens? It hatches out of an egg, and then it starts to develop, gills, and then, it starts to develop, and then their limbs come out. And then what does it do? It comes out of the water, and it's got to trust that it can now breathe air, right? I mean, can you imagine that? And that's the same thing that you have to do, is by always growing and always be learning, is to be patient with yourself and to trust. Because in Kundalini, which is in the Sanskrit, which is the ancient, language that the yogis, had developed or, used, and 15,000 words in the U.S. language is actually derived from Sanskrit. And all these words have meanings. And when they say patience actually means to know the outcome. And think about that for a second. To know the outcome, to have patience. Because we always were, patience to us was just be patient, just, relax. Yeah. Someday it'll happen.
Just wait.
But imagine if somebody said, this is going to happen no matter what, so be patient. Because I know for a fact that I'm going to show you a glimpse in the future that this is going to happen in 4 years or less.
Yeah.
You would have a lot more confidence.
If you knew the outcome for certain, you would be patient, wouldn't you? I guess it's the uncertainty, the not knowing.
Yeah.
That makes the patience difficult. In fact, this swings around to a topic that I was going to bring up from the musical Hamilton. There's Aaron Burr. Obviously, it's based on real people, Alexander Hamilton and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. But Aaron Burr, his whole thing is, I'm going to wait for it. I'm the one thing in life I can control, and I'll wait. I'll take my time. I'm not falling behind or running late. I'm not standing still. I'm lying in wait. That's one of his lines. Whereas Alexander Hamilton, he's just go hell for leather for it because he has nothing to lose. So,
nice.
If you knew the outcome, you could wait for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you, man. I like to call them reality boards. I had made a reality board instead of a dream board because I want to make things a reality, right? Which is, again, it's knowing the outcome. And I would put all these things I wanted, and I put a yacht, a helicopter, a private plane, and $10,000 in my bank account at all times, and to have lunch with Tony Robbins, and to have a Mercedes Benz, and all these other things that I wanted, to have a bigger home, and all these things, and have kids, right? To have 3 kids. And on that list, and again, I had a lot more stuff on there, but I would say 100% of the things that I put on that board, on that reality board, came true, that I wanted to come true, because my goals and my dreams had changed as time went on, because I evolved and other things became important to me. Yeah. So no longer did I need the Lamborghini, right? Instead, I was happy with just a Mercedes, right? Yeah. No longer did I need a helicopter or a private jet or anything like that, because I don't want to travel. Yeah. So I didn't want to do that anymore, and I didn't want to do that. So I didn't need that stuff. But the big home, I wanted the big home. So I got the big house. I got the nice cars, we got the nice life. I got all the stuff that I want, and that I need. And, can buy all the cameras that I want. I can test out different things and have fun, and I don't have to worry about those things. Yeah. So, have patience, because it is going to come. It is going to come for you, right?
If you do the work.
If you do the work, you just keep pushing forward. You have to keep pushing forward. This is not The Secret, where you just get to make a list and then sit back, lock the door, put on earplugs, and never leave your house. Don't answer your door. Don't answer your phone. Not how it's going to work.
Not going to work. I can't even remember where I heard it now. But they say that, I think it's the Quakers say, as you pray, move your feet. So they're saying, yes, pray for it. Absolutely. But you got to walk in the direction of the thing that you want. You got to make motion in the direction of the outcome.
Exactly.
Got to do it. You got to do the work.
Oh, totally forgot, man. Our ADD kicked in. You asked me about my books, and I looked up. The most recent one I've actually listened to was the Kevin Hart "I Can't Make This Up" Life Lessons.
Oh wow, is it good?
Yeah, I liked it.
Is it
my
funny?
wife liked it as well.
He reads it, yeah.
Yeah, he reads it,
Oh,
and it was funny because he wasn't reading. He was like kind of like going a little off script and a little on there.
Yeah, nice.
So it was good. I definitely listened to it, but I have like probably like 100. Yeah, I have like 100. Let me scroll down there. Look, can you see?
Good.
I haven't listened to any of those.
Oh, and I saw at the top
Some of
influence.
these I've had though.
Robert Cialdini there, at the very top.
Yeah, I have listened to some of these, and some of these are good. But I probably in a year or 2 years ago was the last time I listened to some of the other ones. So I don't know what to really give you guys.
One I listened to not long ago was the Chimp Paradox, because I hadn't listened to that yet or read that, and I found that interesting. I found that very, very interesting. I'd definitely recommend the Chimp Paradox. Have you read that?
I have not. Remind me that I'll download that one.
Yeah.
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Okay.
It's one of my favorites, an oldie but goodie. I've actually listened to that so many times, but I've got it on my Audible now too, so I can listen to it again. Mm-hmm. There was also what was it called? The 5 Love Languages, and he has a couple versions of that for like kids and also for work as well. That's pretty brilliant as well. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
No.
Yeah, that's a good one. The 5 Love Languages. Because and Tony actually bases a lot of his stuff he teaches off of that as well. That when whether it's relationships, business, kids, they have like a different way of each person has a different way of what they perceive they prefer their communication to be in. Like some people it's show me that you love me or care about me or that you appreciate me. Some people are do things for me. Do something nice for me. Some people are touchy-feely. They're like, give me a hug or a kiss if you love me. So it kind of touches on all those and learning what people's languages are and then being able to give it to them the way that they prefer. Because some people would be like, I do all these things for you. And they're like, yeah, but if you love me, you would tell me you love me. And then everybody's fighting on, well, listen to my language. And they're like, no, but listen to my language. But they don't realize that they're speaking 2 different languages. And they can't understand why each other doesn't understand that they are doing something for them.
I can't help
myself,
but think that that's very similar to the learning modalities then.
Yes.
Like if I'm auditory and I prefer to learn by hearing, maybe I prefer to hear. I mean, I don't know if they're directly linked, but yeah. So it's very similar. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, for me, I actually fluently speak all 5 love languages, so it's great for me. But in our relationship with me and my wife, Siri Shakti, for several years, it was very challenging.
Right.
Because I would actually communicate in her love language, but because I knew I wanted both of us to be above that and to be able to communicate in more than one love language, I would try to convert her over to a different language, and she'd be like, no, so there was this conflict at first, but today we're able to communicate in all languages, which is great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a good one for another a whole nother episode, isn't it?
A whole nother episode, yeah.
A whole nother episode.
Yep. I think we've probably exhausted everybody here, right?
Well,
great. So people need rest after getting all this information into them. Now they need to go out there and act on it, right?
Big download of information, absolutely a big download. So what would your kind of action step from this be? What would you recommend people do?
Yeah, I would probably say what could we do? Maybe if they were to take from what we spoke about, maybe one, recognize how they learn best, whether it's books, audio, podcasts. I mean, try a couple different out, and maybe you already know what you learn best, but maybe you haven't tried something. So from the other things we talked about, maybe try some of those other ones. And maybe 2 or 3 different mediums works for you. Maybe only 1 or 2 works for you. But zero in on what that is for you. And then I would also say, what are some of the things that maybe you've given up on, that that some of your dreams that you want to make a reality, and maybe it's time to revive those things that you want to accomplish in your life, and maybe write down the top 10 things that you want to accomplish in your life. And from those 10, highlight or put a little star next to the first 3 that you're going to take action on. And then choose the number 1, put a little number 1 next to one of those 3 that you starred, and choose the first one, and then take immediate action on that. Maybe you wanted to write a book. Maybe you wanted to start a YouTube channel. Well, what's the first thing that you can do to take action on it right now? And maybe that's calling somebody that has a successful YouTube channel. Maybe it's buying a book on doing that. Maybe it's watching some YouTube videos on that, or emailing your mastermind group and saying, hey, who do you know that could help me with this? Or joining a Facebook group, because there's plenty of those Facebook groups where you can mastermind with other people that are successful in certain industries. I belong to a lot of them, and I know you do as well, Tony. And maybe that's the first action steps you would take. And I would say that's your homework, your fun task to do for today.
That's a good one. I do like the idea of masterminding with people in groups. And I guess if you're watching this, then that definitely qualifies you to join our Rockstar Entrepreneur Facebook group if you're not already in it. So head on over to Facebook, just search Rockstar Entrepreneur. You will find us there. And in fact, see Dan's t-shirt there. That's the logo you need to look for. There it is. That's the one. So have a look for that and come and join us. Introduce yourself. And that's a great place to get started, to just introduce yourself and just say, hey, this is what I want to achieve. And just maybe that can be your first step to helping you on that journey. And absolutely agree with the trying different ways of learning, different modes or modalities of learning. And I think always be learning. Always be closing. If you've seen, what is that movie called?
Glengarry Glen Ross.
Glengarry Glen Ross. Always be
horrible movie, but great parts.
Yeah, that's it. I don't think I've even seen it. I've seen all the clips that are worth seeing, I think. But always be closing, always be learning. I think that's a good takeaway from this.
I always like what with Dory. I always like just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep learning, just keep growing, just keep selling. There you go.
Oh yes. Right, well, I think that wraps us up for today. So you guys, you know what you need to be doing. You've got your homework. You've got your little task there to do, just to keep growing, keep moving, always be moving forward. So Dan, any closing words from you?
All right, well, be a rock star in your life. Make the world your stage.
And as I like to say, don't stop believing. Thanks for watching.